Welcome to our brand new season on AI in the produce industry, where we're cutting through the hype and asking real questions about how artificial intelligence is actually showing up or not in the agriculture today. I'm your host, Vonnie Estes, and over the next 6 episodes, we're going to explore where AI fits in from the field to the supply chain and all the way to the consumer's plate. We're kicking off this season with someone who knows both sides of this conversation better than almost anyone, Elliott Grant. He's been in Silicon Valley startups, founded his own ag and food tech companies, led innovation projects at Google, and now is at Cambridge, sitting on boards and a host of other things I'm sure we don't even know about. Welcome to the show, Elliott.
That's funny.
I'm so glad to be starting this season with you. I don't know if you remember this, but it was February 2023, and we were both in getting ready to board a flight to Germany. And we were sitting down, it was probably early morning. And I remember you were so excited talking about AI. And you actually said the words, "This is going to change everything." And I remember sitting there, and my exposure to AI at that point was kind of 1960s papers of really geeky people talking about artificial intelligence. And it was always the thing that was 20 years off. And for you to sit down and say, "This is going to change everything, this is real," was super impactful to me. And that was the before times. And here we are. So,
Well, let's see if I'm right.
Yeah, talk about what you saw then and then what's changed, and how do you see AI being applied now, and is it changing everything?
Is it changing everything? Well, so first off, thank you for having me. And I think it's an incredibly important topic. One of the reasons I think we all in Silicon Valley, we thought this changes everything is because it was a seismic event. Right? We could feel that this is a technology that's been around for 50 years, but suddenly, and it really was the advent of ChatGPT, that being sort of broadcast, and then other tools coming along like DALL-E that could do image generation. We all looked at this and said, this is going to be big. And we could see the pace of improvement was extraordinary. So what was that? You said February 23. Fast forward now, more than 2 years, the pace of change has not slowed down. In fact, it's probably sped up. The number of domains that we see AI working in has increased from games and chat. Now we're talking about math and physics and chemistry and material science and biology. The entire world of human knowledge is now being, I think, impacted by AI.
Great. So do you think that we're at the commodity stage yet for AI tools, or are we earlier on the curve, or kind of, what's happening with adoption and what people are doing?
Is it a commodity? Sort of yes and no. I would say for the foundational models, so when I say foundational models, that's things like Gemini 2.5 or ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude. You hear these names. These are literally called foundation models, and they're general purpose AI models or large language models, LLMs. They are neck and neck in their capabilities, and to some extent they're being commodified. The improvements are still impressive, but less dramatic than they used to be. The prices of getting these tools is coming down, and it's just extremely competitive. So I would argue the foundational tools are becoming commodified. However, and that's the yes, but the no answer is the application layer that is built on top of those tools. So think specific uses for them is very much in the early days. That has not commodified yet. Let's give a real example.
Yeah.
Imagine you want an agronomy advising chatbot. Right? So you want a chat agent. You could go to Claude or ChatGPT and ask it agronomy advice, and it's probably going to be pretty bad because it hasn't learned that stuff from the web scraping that it's done. Something like 80 to 90% of the content on the internet is behind paywalls or in corporate databases. It's just not available to those chatbots. That's the job of private companies to go in and upload their own data or find proprietary data to buy and then build a model on top of the foundation. And that's what we start seeing happening now. And there's companies like Bayer and Syngenta, for example, that are building these domain-specific agents for agronomy. And we're just in the early days of that. I think they're going to be incredibly impactful, both in sort of developed economies and places like the global south, where there's just very little agronomy advice. But I think that's a good example of a place we'll see huge impact, and we're just getting started.
That's interesting. So what's the revenue model for that? Is if you look at companies who are doing that, are they going to try to make that a product and productize that, or is that a
Really
tool?
good question. And I think a lot of startups and established companies are wrestling with this question. So if you're a Bayer or a Syngenta, you're obviously in the business of selling inputs. Having an agent which can recommend a product from your catalog makes good sense, right? It's not going to, I mean, now whether it will be limited to your catalog or
Right.
recommend a competitor's product remains to be seen. But you can imagine if you've got a product to sell, having a chatbot as your agent, that obviously makes sense. If you're a new entrant, however, and you're not selling any commodity products, you can imagine that's very disruptive. You're coming in, you're saying, well, I have no biases, and I'm going to recommend this pesticide or that biological. The question is, who pays for that? You clearly could be taking money out of somebody else's pocket, but is the farmer willing to pay for that yet? And the answer there is, we don't know. It's
Right.
just too early to tell. But it's established business that you would pay an agronomy advisor, a human today, maybe a service provider. So it means it's not illogical that you would pay something similar to an AI agent. So that's model number two. Is it's a new entrant. Model number three is growing organization or grower cooperative, for example, builds their own. Right? They say, well, this is something that we just want to improve our own internal capabilities, and it's a strategic investment. And the business model is we're going to be better growers if we build this. So each of those three models is competing with each other right now. And I don't know which is going to win out.
That's fascinating. I was talking to one company, it was a distributor, and they were developing a tool which is kind of built on foundation models, like you're talking about, where they would, a salesperson would get a notification that all of the climactic things were happening, that apple scab was going to be a huge problem. And
Right.
that, so it told the salesperson, here's all the people that you've sold product to in your database before, and you need to let them know that this is happening. And by the time, the salesperson like gets home, the emails have been sent out. And so the amount of time that would have taken, without a tool like that. So I see like all these different places that people can use it, and it just, it kind of speeds up.
Well, and I think that example is a terrific segue to this sort of the bigger question, which is how do you deploy AI? And
Yeah.
sort of you touched on that. What you described, I would argue, is augmentation. Right? You took a salesperson and made them much more effective by scaling the speed and reach 100x. So let's
Right.
call that augmentation. I would argue that that's where most of what the AI we see today is. So it's transcribing documents or creating these kind of marketing messages or capturing data in a more efficient way. So we're augmenting the way we do business today. And it could even be an automation. Let's make sure we don't just limit ourselves to sort of chatbots. Imagine, and there's a company I know that is automating the height of a cutting head for a pruning shears. Currently, this is done with the guys driving the tractor in a straight line and trying to also adjust the height of the pruning shears at the same time. And
Oh,
invariably, either they go too slow or they go too fast and they damage the vine. Use AI to automatically adjust the height of the pruning shears, and the driver can focus on driving. Turns out you can do two sides of the vine at once, you can drive twice as fast. Huge improvement in productivity. So again, I put all of those things under the bucket of this is augmentation. But I think what a lot of folks fear, and it will come, is replacement. This is where AI can do the job that a human was doing better, cheaper, faster, more efficiently. And that will have an impact on the workplace. My hypothesis, my hunch is it will take away, however, the roles that are repetitive, not particularly interesting. Now, that's not to say that
possibly
people aren't going
dangerous and dirty.
yeah, exactly. It's like robots, right? They're dirty, dangerous, and boring in this case. I
Yeah.
think those will happen. I mean, I can visualize a couple of examples already today. Think inspecting fruit. It's currently done. It's sort of tedious. It's a bit subjective. That will be done better by AI. Or moving packaging around in a field. We already see companies emerging to sort of do material movement. It's clearly a replacement. Now, it doesn't replace the whole job, and I think this is the key. It replaces the drudgery parts of the job. And therefore, the person who is doing this job plus something else can spend more of their intuition and human skills doing the else. So I've talked about augmentation and replacement, but there's a third category of AI job. And this I would call transformation. This is where you can do a task that was just simply previously impossible. This takes a little bit more imagination because we're so good at just imagining what we do today, maybe doing it a little bit faster or cheaper. But I think the opportunity is to use AI to do business differently. And I'll give a couple of
Yeah,
examples.
just examples.
See and spray or precision spraying is a really good example. That's humanly impossible to drive through a field at 15 miles an hour and spray every single weed. But we can clearly now do that. And we built machines at Mineral. John Deere has a machine that does that. That kind of task wasn't possible before. And it has cascading effects on the business once you can do it. Or here's another one. Imagine being able to continuously monitor plants in the field. Today, a grower might go out and scout a field every few days or every few weeks and just look at a few edge cases. But technology is getting so cheap, you could have an AI basically watch continuously samples of your field. Again, it will transform the way we think about how fast we can respond to something, or how accurately can I control the irrigation system, for example. So I'm excited by the augmentation and replacement for efficiency and productivity, but I'm really excited about the opportunity to transform the way we grow food productively and sustainably.
Yeah, I'm starting to see, I'm sure you are too, startups that couldn't have existed before now. People, I was talking to someone recently who's got a soil monitoring company that he's starting, and just the amount of information we can get from the soil right now, and so much data that we could never have processed before. And so now we can get that data, we can work with that data, we can get outputs from that data, and we can make recommendations and then actually do tasks if then you're tied into some machine that's out there that we just couldn't do that before. And I think the same, you and I have talked about breeding, this is the same thing. I mean, the things that we can do in breeding now is like, there was so much data that we couldn't all pull together. So I agree. I mean, that whole area, we're just going to have things that we couldn't do before.
Yep, exactly. Very exciting. There's a twist or a caveat to this, which is I think we'll end up in a place where the AI has learned things that we don't understand. And that's a little bit of a scary space. So it will be making recommendations based on soils, for example, or maybe a hybridization, a cross based on genomics, but it can't explain to us why it's making that recommendation.
So it's made kind of a, cognitive is the wrong word, but it's made like a causation correlation leap that it can't explain that what.
Yeah, absolutely. When humans do this today, we have this thing called tacit knowledge, like a great breeder or a soil or an agronomist might make a decision, but they can't really explain why, right? It's a feeling. My prediction is AI is going to get there. Yeah, and because it thinks in multidimensional space, we cannot understand how it's thinking.
One of the things you and I have talked about too is looking across like the whole supply chain, all the way from breeding and crop inputs and what's going on in the soil to getting those blueberries on the shelf at a major retailer. Can you kind of walk us through the supply chain of some generic vertically integrated company from crop inputs to retail, and how AI tools can be transformative there?
Yeah, it's probably a good way to think about it, not only because in each step of the supply chain there's implications, but also because some of these implications are cross supply chain.
Yeah.
And so I actually think it's really important to look at the whole view. All right, so let's do this. Let's make up a company so that we don't, disclose it. I recently heard about this fruit called sapote. I've never had it. Apparently it's like a persimmon, and it tastes like chocolate pudding. So I'm eager to try it. But so let's imagine we've got a fictional company that breeds, grows, packs, and markets sapote. And if anyone of your listeners tell me I'm pronouncing it wrong, I apologize.
Not sure anyone would know. Maybe in this group.
Exactly. Anyone would know it would be these guys. So you're the sapote company, and you've planted thousands of crosses in your breeding department, and you've sequenced the sapote genome, or at least subsets of it, right? Panels of it. And you've used AI to capture plant traits. So, for example, you've walked through your breeding field with a mobile phone, and you've used the camera to very accurately measure color and size and number of sapote fruit. So there's one use case, improving the objectivity of data collection. And then you feed that AI generated data into your genomic database. And what you do is you try to find correlations between the gene sequences and the traits, and probably the environment and the management practices as well. So this is genomic prediction. Can we predict which genes caused which traits to occur? Incredibly difficult to do. I mean, talk about a lot of data. This is just way beyond the ability of humans to understand. But if you collect enough data, and there's early evidence this will work, you could at least identify markers or sections of the genome that are predictive of certain traits. Once you have those markers, now you can much more quickly screen out your thousands of varieties of new seeds and select for the next season. So summarizing, the opportunity in breeding is better data collection, more predictive breeding, and much quicker selection of new varieties. So the output for the produce industry should be, we might have a faster pipeline of new crops, and we might see development of more interesting crops that previously would have been impractical to breed because it was just too expensive. So that's on the breeding side. I'm excited about the top of the funnel. Now let's go into the growing side. One of the outputs of all that breeding work would be agronomy insights. We now know that this variety of sapote grows really well with this kind of water. It's really sensitive to saline, or maybe it's drought tolerant. So we start to get insights about the growing practices. We take that knowledge and we give it to growers in an AI agronomy chat agent. So now a grower who maybe has never grown sapote before can understand what's the pruning technique, or how much irrigation should I use. So questions that previously would have had to go back to a human breeder, which would have been a bottleneck, can now be answered instantly in the field in any language with a chat agent. And so the grower is much, a beginner grower can get to good very quickly. Let's take it further. Let's say that we derive a model of how does the plant respond to irrigation. So rather than today, turning irrigation on in the morning and off again half an hour later, which is sort of the irrigation program, what if we had a precision irrigation system? So the valves were controlled by the AI, and it's turning on and off the irrigation based on the rainfall prediction, the climate, the soil moisture, the electroconductivity of the soil, all these things it's measuring. And we go from a world where we're turning irrigation on and off by humans to a system that's controlled by AI. And then my prediction would be not only use less water, but have much tighter control of the traits we want. And we could go on and on about the uses of AI in growing and robotics for things like mowing or UV treatment, so robots going down, treating the plant for UV, or maybe patrolling the vineyards looking for broken water lines. There's lots of use cases. So there we go. We're in growing. Now, let's get to harvest. I'm not bullish on the idea there'll be humanoid robots in the future picking fruit in the field, the sort of shiny humanoids, Terminator-like, picking soft fruit. I don't think that will happen. I think, and we can come back in 5 years and see if I'm right or wrong, we'll still see humans in the field picking fruit because humans are just so incredibly good at this fine motor skill and the ability to observe fruit and deal with occlusion and deal with different environmental conditions. However, those humans will be augmented with material movement robots, maybe exoskeletons, so their posture is preserved. Maybe they're wearing augmented reality glasses, so they're capturing data from the field as they go and uploading yield forecasts. But I'm just skeptical that we're going to turn farms into factories full of shiny metal robots. So here we go. So now we have the fruit. It's in tubs. It gets into a packing line. Another AI system comes along and it inspects the fruit automatically for size and color and grade. That's relatively straightforward. And here's an example where I think we can talk about the integration of the supply chain. That data could be sent downstream to a retailer instantly to say, hey, I've got this fruit available, maybe price it or sell it instantly on the spot, or send information back to the grower to say, hey, you're picking too green. So the idea of integrating up and down the supply chain, or going all the way back to the breeder to say, this is the results we're getting from this new variety in this block. I think the opportunity is to tie the supply chain together in a way that wasn't possible. Let's finish it off with the last mile, the last step of the supply chain, the marketing, which I think sometimes gets short shrift in our conversations. Let's pretend, actually it's true, that sapote has very poor shippability. That's why we don't get it in California. It's kind of mushy. I certainly don't get it in England where I am now. So imagine instead of going through the traditional supply chain, we do direct-to-consumer marketing of sapote. So we have AI bots that take the harvest information, blast out emails to people and say, hey, the sapote fruit's coming in, place your order right now. And if we get really crazy, we say, we're going to drone delivery this thing to you, and it will be there in an hour or by tomorrow morning. That would be kind of cool. I would sign up for that.
That would be very cool.
Just to finish off on that marketing question, those marketing messages that go out would be personalized to me, my health goals, my family, my language preferences, my ethnicity. The idea of sort of the one size fits all is going away. We will basically have much more customized content tied back to the specifics of that particular product. So that's a very quick view through the entire supply chain. I probably missed out a lot of things, but I
Yeah.
hope you get the feel from that AI is just going to integrate into all kinds of different parts of the produce industry.
There are so many questions I could ask on that, but one I would say is we did an example of maybe kind of a vertically integrated company. If you're not vertically integrated and every single one of those pieces that we just talked about is a separate company, does that slow down the adoption of these types of tools? We tried to had more transparency in the supply chain. There's been a lot of issues. So does that slow things down, or is there a way to kind of bridge put those things together? Remember
I
blockchain?
think,
No, it's like that.
oh, did you say blockchain? I'm not going there. um, look, I think you're right. I do think that a vertically integrated player, and there are not that many of them, but a vertically integrated player has the advantage that they don't need to create incentives for each person in the supply chain to share data. And I think the underlying subtext of everything I've talked about is data. We need data to train these models. We need trade data for the genomics, for the quality, for yield forecasting. And if players in the supply chain hoard that data and say, I'm not sharing it, we won't get to that end state. On one level, I think this will maybe drive vertical integration because there's a clear benefit for it. Or it will drive some kind of virtual vertical integration where companies, even though they're legally separate, come up with sort of data sharing agreements between them. And so I think we'll see new models for valuing data. That's the other thing, data isn't free, right? It's expensive to collect, it's valuable to the modeler. Not all data is equally valuable, so we'll need to have much more sophistication about how we think about data and how we pay for it. But at the end of the day, you're exactly right. If there are barriers in the supply chain for flow of data, we won't get to this end state.
Then my second question on that is, so if we have the vision that you just put forth, which is, a lot of time saving, a lot of resource saving, but who, say we're kind of there in 5, 8 years or something, who wins and are there losers in that vision?
I think if I knew who was going to win, I'd probably be placing bets on it right now. Well, I mean, maybe I'll reflect on the previous comment. I do think vertical integration is a huge advantage. And so players that have the ability to integrate up and down the supply chain will benefit. Now, there are disadvantages from integrating. Of course, if you own growers, you own the capital and the risk. So there are reasons that the supply chain did fragment.
Well, that's why they
Uh,
contracts grow, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and so I don't think the answer is everyone's going to suddenly buy out their supply chain.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think there will be winners and losers. I think let's sort of back out a little bit. If we believe that AI will make general knowledge a commodity, in other words, just like Google search today, but basically any farmer could get access to really good quality information with a free app on their cell phone or a $20 a month subscription. What's that going to do to companies whose business is basically providing that information? I think they're going to suffer. So if you're in the business of providing generic recommendations or integrating existing information or summarizing things, that's going to be a very tough road to hoe. The future, I think, the winners will be those who have access to proprietary data, who can build proprietary models or some other kind of scarce resource, and who can really leverage the intuition and creativity of the humans in their workplace. Because if I really play it out and I push to the max what I think AI will do, what we're left with is the things that humans are just extremely good at, which
Mhm.
is learning very efficiently and being creative. I just want to touch on this learning efficiently. AI learns very inefficiently. It takes millions of data points, millions of images of a defective fruit to teach it what a defective fruit is. You could teach a 6-year-old to discriminate between defective fruit with like 2 or 3 examples. Not that you can hire 6-year-olds in quality inspection, that's not what I'm saying. But the point is, humans are just wired to learn from very sparse data. AI cannot. And the reason I mention that is domains that are very expensive to collect data will be very tough to apply AI in. And those will be the places where you can win if you're leveraging the human. So look, there's ways to win if you're leveraging AI. I think it's hard not to, but there's also ways to win by leaning into your human expertise and then augmenting that with AI.
One more question before we wrap up is kind of bringing it back to current day. So, I know that you're talking to a lot of different companies in the produce industry, and depending on where you are in the supply chain, it's a different, but any generic advice of what the industry should be doing right now and kind of more prescriptive advice. And then what's the risk of people who are doing nothing and not looking at AI as a way to help their business?
Look, I don't want to say that everyone should be rushing in right now and doing AI. It's still an emerging technology. There's a lot of traps to fall into. There's probably a legitimate fast follower strategy. Let somebody else try it out and follow. And I think that's a legitimate strategy. But planning to do nothing is probably not a very good idea. There are things we can do that should be no regrets moves if you're in business in the produce industry. One, and I say this all the time, is think about the data that your business thrives on, and are you collecting it? Are you securing it? Because that, I think, will be the basis of your competitive advantage in the future. Now, data or knowledge, let me expand that. So there might be proprietary things you're doing that no one else is doing. That's going to be valuable in the future. Or there are proprietary things human knowledge you have, really identify that and protect that. Because all the things that are commodity will just go away. The other thing I think is to recognize that a lot of team members in the company employees are probably afraid of the impacts of AI, afraid for what it's going to do to their jobs, their livelihoods, and I think that's a legitimate concern we shouldn't dismiss or brush away. How do we as industry leaders help the team, everyone in the company, come along with the journey? How can they be part of it? How can they contribute to it? And so things as simple as having conversations with the company about what are the parts of your job that are kind of boring and drudgery, and we'd love to replace them, right? And actually have that be something that comes from the bottom up rather than top down. I'm sure in every company there are a few people who are just super excited about using this new tool, but feel like they don't know if they can, because they've probably been told, whatever you do, don't put anything into ChatGPT. So how do we get from the fear to the functional?
Right, yeah.
Providing safe tools, education on how to be cyber secure will probably allow some people to bubble up in the organization who are real advocates for this. So I think these are sort of no regrets things you can do today. And like I do every day, I'm just using these tools and I'm playing with them just to figure out what they can and what they cannot do. And I think that is a relatively low risk way to get started.
I was talking to someone the other day that said, if you have an idea, try it. And even if it doesn't work, try it in 6 months because it'll probably get better. So it's realizing that all of these tools are continuing to evolve. And I think, as you said, just making it risk-free in the organization. Well, Elliott, thank you. We could go on for hours. It's really great to talk to you. To the listeners, if you don't follow Elliott on LinkedIn, you should follow him. He also writes a lot of articles on Medium, and it's just a real good thinker in this area. And so it's helpful for me to follow you and follow your journey of what you're thinking about in this area. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Vonnie. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for tuning in to Fresh Takes on Tech, hosted by Vonnie Estes. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe, rate, and share it with your network. You can find more episodes and resources at freshproduce.com. See you next time for another Fresh Take.